My name is Josh Dobbins. My wife, children, and I have been coming to Pursuit since 2018. On and off since 2018. We've been consistently coming for the last 3 years. My wife, Hillary, and I, we have 3 boys. My oldest son is from my first marriage, and then Hillary and I have 2 sons together. So I've been a believer in Jesus most all of my life. However, I have not been much of a follower, and I've come to realize that more and more over the past few years. So I grew up in a small town in northwest Georgia. I was primarily raised by my wonderful mom. My dad was around in my childhood. However, my dad was also heavily involved in illegal drug activity. But thankfully, my mom, the good Lord, had shielded me from all that. And in 1993, the FBI called up my dad and his criminal lifestyle. Dad was arrested. He was facing 38 years in a federal penitentiary for drug charges. My dad ended up taking a plea deal and only served 8 of those years. So I was 13 when my dad got released, and it was kind of hard getting adjusted to him back in my life, because really, truth be known, he wasn't in my life much prior to that. And about the same time he got released, he had married his secretary, which actually was one of his friend's wives. And this was Dad's 5th marriage at the time. My dad had a heart for women, I guess. And this was also the same age that he introduced me to the sex talk. And looking back now, I can see how skewed that talk really was. I can almost quote it word for word. He said, son, in the next few years, there's going to be more women than you know what to do with. Just enjoy yourself. And that followed with my own subscription to adult magazines at 13. So very, very skewed way of having a 13-year-old and having that talk, I think. So about 4 short years later, I had gotten arrested for underage consumption. In high school, I'd started living the party life a good bit, drinking and enjoying it. So my mom and dad, they both thought it would be good for me to live with my dad, have a more structured upbringing, a little bit more discipline. So I moved in with my dad, and that turned out to be the exact opposite. I had more freedom. Girls were welcome to come and go, had an open bar. So at 17, I took full advantage of all of that, as you can imagine. So right after graduating high school, I had the opportunity to start working for a company, and I was traveling all over North America and Canada, working on hydroelectric dams. So I was very young, working about a bunch of grown men, and pretty much traveling was just a life of party. We'd work, we'd drink, we'd have a good time. But I quickly kind of become a supervisor and manager through this company and started running outages all over North America. I think the stress of that just let me start drinking heavily. And at this time, I started using heavy amounts of steroids, testosterone, and about anything else you could imagine. So it was just vanity and money seemed to be kind of my focus in life at this point. My work career landed me in Charlotte. I was working on a project up here, and that's where I met my wonderful wife, Hillary. We instantly fell in love, and I had an opportunity to start working up here full time. So I took that and I relocated to the Charlotte area. Quickly after living up here, within a few months, Hillary became pregnant with our first son, Vance. Right after he was born, we got married. And then 3 short years later, our youngest son, Nash, was born. And this was about the same time we started coming to Pursuit. And it was August of that year, I had my first just profound experience, probably my absolute first in my life of feeling God's presence. One evening, my wife just simply asked me to pray right before bed, and I immediately got defensive. And I said, no, I don't want to pray. I'll pray in my head. And truth be known, I didn't have much of a prayer life at all. So I definitely didn't want to pray with her. But she was persistent, and she continued on. And in that moment, we just prayed together and started talking to God, and mostly tears, not a lot of words, but I felt God's full presence over my body. It was just this angelic warmth I've never felt, and I will never forget. However, shortly after that, I really wasn't committed, and I continued to live for the world. And this was about 2019, and my mom and dad actually got married for the first time in my life. This was Dad's sixth marriage. But my relationship with my dad at this point had really started to turn around. And we were starting to get a lot closer. And then COVID happened, and we definitely got lost in the world. We quit coming to church. And at this time, my bourbon addiction and steroid addiction was running rampant. With the world shut down, I just did plenty of cycles of steroids. I stayed in the gym. I drank all the time. I was really lost. But I was able to maintain my role as a husband and as a father. And I was able to maintain my job, but I probably did all those poorly. Then in July of 22, my life really turned upside down. We got a call one morning, and my dad had went into cardiac arrest that night. So my wife and I, we hopped in the car. We drove to Chattanooga. We made it in time just to see him on life support. And that was tough because, my relationship with my dad had really just started flourishing, 3 years prior to that. So it was hard to see him like that. So we got there in time to pretty much sign him off life support. My dad died that day. And it was tough. That took a toll on me. And my dad, he had a pretty big record service in the Chattanooga area. We've been open since 1947. So he had accumulated so much stuff. It was not to be believed. I mean, he had a business, cars galore, records, and he had no will. And in the state of Georgia, everything goes through probate, and it's a messy, messy process, especially when I'm 6 hours away. So I ended up taking a mental health leave from work. Started meeting with a counselor and just kind of unpacking my childhood. And I didn't ever realize the weight my childhood carried on me to this day. This stuff that happened and stuff that bothered me that I didn't really realize. And so I really lost it there for a while. And then in November of that year, if things couldn't get worse, I nearly lost my life. It was November 25th. We had some friends over. We had been drinking, and I had a Dodge Viper that I had spent 2 years rebuilding. And one of my friends wanted to go for a ride. So ignorantly, I said, sure, let's go. So about 2 miles from the house, we wrecked. I hit a concrete telephone pole running about 100 miles an hour. And in a fiberglass car, you can imagine not much was left. No airbag, no seatbelt, but God was certainly with us because we both walked away virtually unscathed. I did get charged then with a DWI because I had been drinking, and I was honest about that. So immediately after the wreck, I stopped drinking, and that lasted for about 2 weeks. And then I picked the bottle back up, continued to drink, and then December 28th of that year, I was broken. I was weak. So in my brokenness and my weakness, I just cried out to Jesus. I said, God, I have done this so many times on my own, and every single time that I try, I fail. I said, I need you, and I can't do this alone. And as I prayed, God met me there in that prayer. And from that moment on, I had zero desire to drink. And to this day, I have still had zero desire to drink. I've always related to this scripture. It's 2 Corinthians 12, 9 and 10. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That's why, for Christ's sake, I delight in my weakness, my insults, and my hardships and persecutions and difficulties, for when I'm weak, that I am strong. Just in that moment of him taking away something that I had tried countless times on my own, and I couldn't do it. And he said, "Son, I have you." And he picked me up there. So shortly after that, I did end up going to court for my DWI charge. And I was given some information that my blood alcohol content was 0.003. And that's just a merciful God we show, because I had been drinking a whole lot more than a 0.003. So after that, I just chose to follow him and not the world. I had done a lot of reflecting and prayer about the life I had been living, and my skewed morals, and how I was so convicted about just my steroid use, the pornography, which I'd always viewed as normal. And I never realized viewing pornography was not normal, because at 13, I was introduced to it, and I was like, oh, this is what everybody does. But I spent a lot of time in prayer seeking God's strength to overcome this, and it had been so normalized in my life for so long. And thankfully, through prayer and over time, God had removed those two things that had just really crippled me without me even knowing it. Since fully surrendering my life over to Jesus, my wife and I, we have faced so many different storms. However, instead of reaching for the world during these storms, we just keep our eyes on Jesus. We've gotten to witness so many miracles and receive so many blessings. So since fully surrendering my life to the Lord, my wife has been baptized. My 3 sons have been baptized. I've had the privilege to baptize my mom earlier this year. And along with that, I've helped several friends through their own addictions. And one evening, as I was praying to God, I was helping a friend through his addiction, and I was praying, and I said, God, just let me serve your will and your way. And in that moment of prayer, I was met with God in a way that I'd never experienced. It felt like hot oil was poured all over my body. All I could do was cry. I didn't really know what to say or what to do, but I felt in that moment that God had put a calling on my life that was undeniable. And that calling was to be in a recovery ministry. And I found out our church was actually in need of that. So I've been the male lead in our life recovery ministry since earlier this year, and I've been serving with Ashley, and it's been really good to see what that ministry can do, and how much our church truly needs that. It's been an honor to serve in that, but since leading life recovery, God has placed something else on my heart that I feel like is deeply overlooked in our culture, and it's socially accepted, and that's sexual sin and the addiction to pornography and even infidelity. I think as our society, we forget addiction comes with many different roots, and at the end of the day, addiction is addiction. I feel like it's encouraged these days. It's so normalized to sexualize women, and pornography is just, I was looking up statistics, and it says 65% of all Christian males admit to watching pornography at least once a month. And that was just staggering to me. So I talked with the church, and they agreed that we need to do something about it. And I put cards on everybody's table. My name's on there, contacts on there. So we're going to start a sexual sin ministry. It's going to be held in this room on Thursday nights. It'll probably start mid to end of October. Don't have an exact start date, but more will become at a later date for that. But I figured, God has just made such a mighty move in my life, and, he's made his presence known, and it's undeniable. So I just wanted to share with you guys tonight, and that's all I got.